On April 19, 2018, the newest member of the Seven Deadly Sins appeared in a barren wasteland to fight his most devious foe yet. Utilizing his immense magical energy, he shot wave after wave of devastating lightning, sadly to no prevail. But just as things were looking grim for our hero, he summoned his ace in the hole, his sacred treasure. And with Nathaniel using his sacred treasure, he's able to use all of his magical abilities at once, leaving Sir Fluffle completely defenseless. I know. I just lost to a dog. I get it. I'm ashamed as well, but I tried my damnedest best. But apparently it's not good enough, so here you go. Are we all happy now? Can you see what I got going on here? I'm the king of losers. This is my crown, and this is my label. King of losers. I'm sure you're all very happy. But anyways, we're not here to talk about my utter defeat that was very embarrassing and will scar me the rest of my life. No, we're here to talk about something much bigger than you or I in any way we can ever imagine. That's right. My sacred treasure, God's Knight. And I know a lot of you might be thinking like, no, Nathaniel, that's just a broomstick with the handle cut off. But if that was so, then could my sacred treasure do this? God's judgment! Stop! That's right. My sacred treasure's ability is to cause earthquakes. What up? But anyways, let's get into what we're actually doing today. I'm assuming you guys all know what's up, probably, because of the title and the introduction. But we're talking about the Seven Deadly Sins and their sacred treasures. And we're going to be talking in depth as much as we can, because honestly, the sacred treasures are a little bit of an enigma, whether, you go a little further in the manga or the anime or even on the wiki. But we're going to be talking about their origins, how they work, and the specific sacred treasure that each sin has, and how it personally helps them. So, let's not delay anymore. Let's get right on into it. Let's talk about the origin of the sacred treasures. So not much is actually known about the sacred treasures' origins. I'm not even sure if there's not more than 7 of them. I want to say that there are weapons on the same tier as the sacred treasures, but they're not called the sacred treasures. I believe the sacred treasures is a name given to the weapons of the 7 deadly sins. So you might, let's take a sword. It's a sacred treasure. You have an axe over here that's just as powerful, but it's not called the sacred treasure because it's not being held by one of the 7 deadly sins. The sacred treasures' weapons are kind of like their own special unit of weapons, like get their own special name. So think of the sacred treasures kind of like our military. We might have the Green Berets as a special force, and then the Rangers as a special force. Now, a Ranger can't be a Green Beret, and a Green Beret can't be a Ranger. But who's to say which group is better? They might be on the same tier as far as combat ability and everything. So anyways, back to the sacred treasure. There are 7 of them, and they were first formed in the kingdom of Leonis. And the king, Bartra, once they were formed, he bestowed them to the 7 deadly sins, because they were already a group and they were already very famous. They already had great magical power and very a force to be reckoned with, really. But it was said once they were bestowed their sacred treasures, they became the absolute most powerful knights in the kingdom. So that is basically all the origins we have. We don't know who created them. We don't exactly know if they had been around for generations. They've been passed down and passed down. It made it sound like it hadn't, that they had just been formed and then they were given to them, but it's not exactly set in stone. So anyways, with that kind of covers where they come from. It also raises some questions that we can't answer yet. But also let's get into exactly what a sacred treasure is. And I do believe that King states this better than anyone, even than the wiki. The wiki pretty much quotes King. And a sacred treasure is basically a tool for one of the 7 deadly sins to use to harness all of their magical ability at once. And to make this make more sense, I'm going to use the same analogy that King used. Imagine a giant lake. All the water in the lake is your magical power. And you're only able to use your hands to take some out and use it. You're fighting a foe, you take a little bit out, this is how much you get. I can use this much magical ability. Throw it in their face. That's not very much. However, if you're given a sacred weapon, however, if you're given a sacred treasure, it's used as like a catalyst to be able to use all of the water, all of the power within yourself. So sacred treasures are used to harness all the magical abilities in oneself. And it kind of manifests in a very specific and unique way in each sin. And that's because each sin has a unique way of fighting. So now that we kind of know where they came from, how the seven deadly sins got their hands on them, and how and what they do, let's talk specifically each sacred treasure that the sin acquired and how it helps them personally. And I'm going to start with King, because honestly, King's sacred treasure is flushed out the best and raises one major question for me. So King's sacred treasure is Chastity Fall. It's basically a spear that he can control with his mind. And there's actually 8 different configurations that it can turn into. But before I get into that, the one thing that kind of makes me interested and that kind of throws a wrench in the origins of the sacred treasures is it has been confirmed that Chastity Fall was created from the sacred tree that's only found in the fairy realm. And my problem with that is we've already seen in the anime how humans are treated in the fairy realm and how fairy and human relations go back and forth. So I don't really understand how King Bartra could have got his hands on a weapon like this, how he could have created it, and it's not like he had good relations with the fairies and he could have been like, hey, can you create me a badass weapon that's gonna be super formidable to any foe? And they're like, yeah, of course we will. We'll give you an amazing weapon that you might turn and slaughter your own people with. No. So I don't exactly know how that happened. It might be another thing if the sacred treasures have been around for thousands of years and been passed on and passed on. Then I could see if over the course of time, someone could have had good relations, someone could have snuck in, something could have happened. But if it's true that the sacred treasures have only been around for 20, 30 years, I don't know how the king could have pulled it off, making the sacred treasure from that tree. But anyways, that's just some of the beef that I have with it. But let's get into the actual techniques that Chastity Fall has. It really has 8 techniques, technically like 20 something if we get really into detail, but let's stick with the main 8. So as I said, Chastity Fall was created from the sacred tree in the fairies realm. And since King is the fairy king, it only makes sense that he gets to harness this sacred weapon. And the reason it complements his fighting ability so much is because King is insanely physically weak. So if you were to give him Meliodas' short sword or frickin' Dian's giant hammer, he wouldn't be able to weld them properly. He wouldn't be able to even weld the hammer, and he wouldn't be able to strike with force because he doesn't have any physical force. So with Chastity Fall, he's able to control it with his mind. The spear is floating the whole time. It's moving around without anyone touching it. King, since he's a fairy, is also able to fly and levitate and fly all around in the air really fast. So it makes sense that his sacred treasure is also Chastity Fall, since it's able to mimic his ability of being in the air and stuff like that. So he can use it while he's in the air. He can be flying in the air and then control his spear down on the ground for a better perception of the battlefield. So that's truly where Chastity Fall's greatest ability for King comes in. Their compatibility is basically that King is weak, so he's able to use Chastity Fall with his mind instead of his own bronze. So let's talk about Chastity Fall's configurations. He has 8 first configurations, because Chastity Fall is also able to transform into True Spirit Chastity Fall, which basically he has all the same abilities or just hyped up to a greater power. So the first form is Pillow. So if you count this first form, there would be 9. But it's just its base level form, the form that it's in, unless King decides for it to be indifferent. And that's Pillow. It's just a big polka dot green pillow that follows King everywhere. King can use it as a pillow. He can sleep on it. He can sleep on it while it's floating. So honestly, just the best configuration there is. The only use it has for in battle is as a shield. It's still very strong. So if someone were to go punch King, the pillow would come in front of them and it would be blocked. But that's about the only use it has for in battle. So Chastity Fall after that has 8 configurations if you don't count its first one. And the first configuration of the first form is just named Chastity Fall. And this is this form we see it in 90% of the time. And that's the spear. Just the long stick with the pointy thing at the end. A spear they throw at people. So in this form, King is able to control the spear with his mind. He's able to make it spin really fast and then attack people, make it go around like a freaking bullet and then strike right through people's hearts. He's able to control the spear in any type of way he wants with his mind. Go in the air, anything like that. We haven't seen it, but it'd be cool if like King can like force it to go underground and like come up like 100 feet over there and stab someone through the base. That'd be pretty cool. But anyways, that's basically all that the first form can do. It's just a spear that King can control. Form 2 is named Guardian. And this is like the most interesting technique in my opinion. But it's a giant bear that has 4 arms, and it is used more as defense or to immobilize an enemy, because the bear can like grab onto their arms with 2 of its hands and then grab onto its feet with the other 2 to completely stop the enemy from moving, and then he can attack them from there. And again, King can control this however he wants to his full utmost desires, and that's with any of the stages basically. King can control it with his mind. And the other interesting thing about this form is that apparently it's made of it has this like layer of moss around it. And quite a few of the forms have that integrated into their abilities, and I'm assuming it's because it comes from a sacred tree, and a tree sometimes has moss on it, so it makes sense that the weapon it creates can use stuff like that, like moss. And since this form has such a high count of moss, and moss is mostly made of water, the Guardian is very resilient to fire-based attacks. So basically, fire-based attacks are not going to hurt it. However, quite the opposite. Since it has so much water in it, it is very unimmune to water or freezing-based attacks. And that's basically all we know about the Guardian. He's used it a few times, his fight against Bon and his fight against Helbram. And I think that's the only 2 times we've used it. I really like the form, but anyways, moving on to the next one. The third form is Fossilization. And this one is really simple, but it brings up one interesting point. And that is, can King use 2 forms at the same time with any of his 8 forms? So basically, before I get into that, Fossilization is another spear. I don't believe we've seen the whole body of it. We've only seen like the blade part and a little bit of the handle. And this spear is really cool looking because it's a double-sided blade. Like, it's not just like one sharp blade. It has like 2 little sharp blades. Like a prong. I keep thinking trident. I'm like, I know trident's 3. What's 2? It's a prong spear. And how it works is, if the blades penetrate you in any way, cuts you, stabs you right through the heart, any type of coming in contact with the enemy, it will turn you into stone. However, I do believe the spear has to stay in constant contact to continue to turn into stone. So let's say if I had a knife and it had the same powers, if I cut myself, leave it there, my arm would start turning to stone. But as soon as I remove it, my body would stop turning to stone. I don't think it would be irreversible. This chunk of my arm is still stone. My arm would probably fall off. But if I take it off, the rest of my body is not turning to stone. However, if I stab myself in the arm, leave it there, slowly but surely my whole body will turn to stone. I'm not 100% sure if that's how it works, because we've only ever seen it used once in the anime against Bon. But I believe that's my assumption of how it works. And now, let's get back to the interesting kind of question it brings up. King was using his second form, Guardian, against Bon. He had Bon immobilized, like we were talking about, had his hands and legs held. And then, out of the Guardian's stomach, a portal came out. And then his third form, Fossilization, the spear came out and stabbed Bon from behind. But does that mean, when he's using Guardian, can he summon any other of his forms? Is it only Fossilization? When he's using the other forms, can he summon any of the other forms? It can only be used as Guardian. So is King able to summon Chastity Fall, the Spirit, and then summon Fossilization, the other sphere, and use them two at once? Would maybe they be smaller spears? As we see in 2 forms later, he's able to break things apart. So maybe he's able to summon Chastity Fall, the full, let's just say, 7 feet, cut it in half to 3.5, and then also form his Fossilization sphere. That would be pretty cool. Like, granted, his reach would be a little shorter, but he could also attack one opponent with 2 different weapons, with 2 different skill levels. But anyways, those are just some thoughts on if King can use 2 sacred treasures, or 2 different forms of sacred treasures at once. I don't know if we're ever going to figure it out, but if we do, that would be super awesome. Let's move on to the 4th form, Sunflower. This one was probably my least favorite. I just felt like it was the most inconsistent and just a big old, like, F-off form, like, when he's really in dire. But it was cool looking. So basically what this one does, it summons a giant sunflower. And the sunflower opens up and shoots just a big old F-off laser beam, I guess, at opponents. And we've seen it used, I think, 2 different times. I know we saw it against Helbram, And then I think we see him use it at the fight at the I don't remember the name of the town, but the stadium where everyone's fighting to get back Deanne's hammer, her sacred treasure. But anyway, so that's basically the gist of it. It forms a giant sunflower and it shoots off F-me-off laser beams. And I just felt like that wasn't consistent with the rest of his weapons, but whatever. Form 5. And this form has like a sub-form that is technically Form 6, and all it is taking the form and attacking with it. So I don't know really why they made it its own stage. Anyways, Form 5 is Increase. It's when King takes Chastity Fall and breaks it into like 1,000 like little shuriken Chastity Falls. Like the shuriken's kind of from Naruto with a different design, but he breaks it up into like 1,000 of those, and then he can attack all at once with them. Same deal. He can control it just like he can control Chastity Fall. And I'm pretty sure if he had 1,000, he could say 500 attack from the left, 500 attack from the right, or 250 this way, 250 this way, so on and so on. I don't know if we ever saw this, because I think the only like really attack he uses is Form 6, and that is Fight Fire with Fire. And that's when he uses Form 5, uses Increase, makes 1,000 of the shuriken blades, and just like rains hell down on his opponents. Just like he shoots all of the blades at one location, at one person, and they all just go straight down at them. So I don't think we ever really see him controlling them. Like, okay, 100 over here, 100 over here, 100 fighting this person, 100 fighting this person. Maybe King can do it later on when he has better like mental capacity and ability to like focus on it, or maybe he's never able to. We don't know. That brings us to the 7th form, a very simple one, and I feel like was just thrown in for the convenience of the anime, and it's called Luminosity, and it's just a little Chastity Fall takes the form of a little sphere that glows. It's basically a lamp. Yep, King's Sacred Treasure, his most powerful weapon, can turn into a lamp. And we've only seen this once in the anime, where at the very end of this first season, King and the other Sin were checking out the underground cave, and they go down there and they're like, oh, it's dark. And King's like, don't worry, guys. Chastity Fall, 7th configuration, Luminosity. And then it was just the lamp. Useful if it's dark, but not any like fighting abilities unless you're fighting in the dark. So anyways, then the last form is Pollen Garden. I really liked the idea of this one. The aesthetic of this one was really cool. And to put it simply, it's a giant barrier that's put around a person or an object that cannot be penetrated by any magical or pretty much any prowess of strength. And another interesting thing about this, because if it was just a shield, useful but kind of boring, it also uses another thing from the sacred tree, and this time it's pollen instead of moss. And I really like that idea of how it was this sacred treasure was made from this tree, so it has uses that the tree used, and this uses pollen. The barrier is made from pollen, and it will use the pollen to heal the person that is under the barrier. So we all know the fight, King against Helbram, and Helbram just beats the living shit out of Diane, and she's about to die. I don't know how she didn't die. I rewatched the anime like a week ago, and I don't remember this, but she had like a huge hole here, like right through her right tit, another giant hole through her abdomen. Like if she tried to walk, she'd be walking like this because she had like no flesh right there. But anyways, King throws up the barrier, Helbram like attacks with all his magical ability, does nothing, but then also that barrier is able to almost fully heal Diane's huge wounds, so it has great healing ability. Anyways, I've been going on about King long enough. I'm just going to briefly mention the second form of Chastity Fall, which is a True Spirit Spear Chastity Fall. And basically, this is the final form of King's Sacred Treasure. It kind of reminded me of like Bankai from Bleach. So I don't know if each of the other Sen's Sacred Treasure can like go up another level, be like, oh yeah, this is a pretty rad sword. But what if this sword was on fire? Then would it be even radder? His spear, his Chastity Fall turns into a really cool gold-looking spear. It holds like the same design to a degree, like the same length and the same width, but the blade part gets way more crazy, like curvy and really wide, and it's all gold. And so far in the anime and manga using this spear, I believe he's only used form 1, 2, 4, and 5. I'm assuming this form can also use all 8 of them, but he hasn't done it yet. So I'm just going to say the True Spirit Spear of Chastity Fall can use all the same forms as the old Chastity Fall, but their destructive abilities just majorly increased. And I'm going to say that's the really big difference between the two. I'm not going to get into each little individual thing. Granted, King uses a few different attacks when he uses this spear, but he doesn't use any new configurations. King might have the normal spear chastity fall, and then compared to his true spirit chastity fall, they're both in their spear form. They both can be used and utilized the same way, attacking the opponent. The only difference is the true spirit chastity fall is way stronger than the other one. So I'm not going to go into detail about each transformation because they're the exact same one. All right, enough about King. I promise you all the other sins are not going to be near as long because the other sins we don't really know much about. Let's just jump in right into my second favorite sacred treasure. And what do you know? It's Diane. Look at that. Little King and Diane right next to each other. Cute couple. So Diane's sacred treasure is Gideon, and it's just a giant warhammer. And I can go through this pretty fast. How it complements Diane's own personal fighting style is raw power. Diane is a giant, and the giant race is respected for their just raw strength and destructive power. So of course, you give a giant ass hammer that they can smash the earth with. It's gonna give them a lot more. It's gonna boost their physical strength. And with the giant hammer, Diane's also able to draw out her full strength and magical ability, just like any other sin. The other way it complements her nicely is we all know the giants have a special connection with the earth. They can pretty much earthbend. Giants can earthbend in this world. To help her earthbend a little better, her giant warhammer, Gideon, helps her to increase the amount of earth she can control. So we've seen in the anime where she just punches the ground and a bunch of earth will shoot out. That's pretty impressive. But when she gets her warhammer, Gideon, she smashes the ground and it literally just divides into 4 sections. Way more earth can be controlled. So that's how she is able to use it specifically and how it helps her. I feel like if she had just a little sword, a big enough sword for a giant to wield, but not like a giant warhammer, it wouldn't be as good. This hammer can actually strike the ground, so I feel like that's how it personally complements Diane's fighting style. A little more background. Like I said earlier, some of the sins actually lost or sold or got stolen. Diane was one of those. She lost her sacred weapon. Don't know how one does that with a giant warhammer, but she lost her sacred weapon, and halfway through the first season, they get it back through the tournament, and then she has her sacred weapon. As of right now, we don't know if Gideon can level up just like Chastity Fall can. That would be really cool. I would love to see the design and the implements that it has with her power, but that's really all we have. It's a giant hammer that helps Diane by releasing all her strength and being able to control the earth better. And that's all we have for Diane's sacred treasure, Gideon. Now let's move on to my favorite sin, Bon. And Bon's sacred treasure is the hardest to pronounce, so I think I got them all down besides this one. It's Holy Staff Corchus. I probably mispronounced that, but basically it's a spear, but that it's a 4-section sphere. Let's say it's a 10-foot sphere, and there's 4 sections. A 2-foot sphere, chain, 2-foot sphere, a little bit of chain connecting it, so on and so on. So that's what his sacred weapon is. And while it's very cool aesthetically looking, I just feel like without it, Bon would be totally fine. Because Bon's ability is Snatch, and I guess this sacred treasure is supposed to complement his ability to Snatch. And I think we've only ever seen him once use his sacred treasure to snatch something. I honestly don't remember what it was, but I do vividly remember only other times he's used Snatch, he didn't even use his sacred treasure. And kind of like Diane, Bon also lost track of his sacred treasure for a while, but his was actually stolen by the Weird Fang Guild when he was taken captive. But he gets it back, and he uses it for fighting, but I mean, all he really does with it is slashing and physical techniques. I mean, frickin' Chastity Fall has a bunch of different configurations. Diane's helps her control the earth better, but Bon just uses it as a normal physical weapon. Granted, it still helps him pull out all his magical ability, but when we use him see Snatch, when he gathers all of the magical ability and strength from another opponent, he doesn't have his sacred weapon then, so it's clear he doesn't need it to do that. And then when he's fighting Galden, he literally uses just his hand to summon his sacred weapon. So it's not like he needs his sacred weapon to snatch an actual object. So I'm a little dubious to exactly what his sacred weapon helps him with besides draw out all of his physical strength. Moving on, because this video is getting long. So now we're going to talk about the leader of the 7 deadly sins and his sacred treasure. And since the actual Japanese name is super hard to pronounce, and I haven't been using the actual Japanese name for any of the other sacred treasure, I'm going to call it by the English name it's kind of given. And that's the Demon Sword, which is a pretty badass name. And as far as physical appearances go, Meliodas' Sacred Treasure is just a short sword. Granted, he's kind of a midget, so it's a longer short sword for him, but it's like, this was the handle, it would only be like yay tall, a short sword. Really cool appearance, it has like 4 holes going through the middle of it, and it has the demon dragon crest like Meliodas has on his body. It also has that on the handle of the sword. So let's jump right into what its ability is, because unlike Ban, this one has a very unique magical ability that really only benefits Meliodas. It would benefit other people, but it specifically benefits Meliodas with his full counter. And the Demon Sword's magical ability is Shadow Clone Jutsu. Oh, just kidding, wrong anime. No, it's cloning. He can clone 4 of himself, creating a total of 5 Meliodases, and he can attack with them. Granted, it is later explained in the anime, it's not like Meliodas, power level 100, 4 other Meliodases, power 100, total 500. No, their power levels are split up, meaning they're all weaker clones. But the reason this Sacred Treasure is such a great tool for Meliodas is not because of him getting extra clones that are powerful. It's because his full counter uses no physical strength. It's all like magical based. So having 4 other people that can do it and can full counter like 1 giant attack or 4 like medium attacks is very handy. But like if Ban had this and he were to clone himself and his power level kept getting cut in half and half and half, it would still be helpful. There would be 4 Bans, but it's not like Ban can use full counter. And we've seen against his fight with Galden, Ban's snatch has a lot of backlash. He can only draw in so much. So maybe as he gets more clones, Ban would his ability to draw in more energy would be cut in half and half again, making even less and less. So it truly is the best weapon for Meliodas. And I would have to say, Meliodas was maybe the most stupid, and how he lost his, he sold it. Yeah, Diane forgot it. That's kind of an idiot move, but we forget things every once in a while. Maybe not giant-ass warhammers, but the other day I forgot my car keys. That was really awful. But yeah, so we forget things. Ban, he was freaking taken captive, so his was taken by the stupid weird things. Not his fault, mostly. But freaking Meliodas is like, this is like the most powerful weapon I could ever really perceive or use, but I really want to have me a drinking hole. So you know what? I'm going to sell this and get a nice little weird-looking tavern. Also, the tavern looks like the hat from Harry Potter that, at the beginning of the first Sorcerer's Stone, it, like, tells which, house you're going to be in, like Slytherin or blah, blah, blah. It has, like, the exact same shape. Getting off topic. Meliodas sells a sword, gets some seed money, buys a tavern. He gets it back, though, in Season 2 from Merlin. Merlin's like, hey, Meliodas, remember this? Just throws him his freaking Sacred Treasure like, thanks. And we never really figure out how Merlin came across his sword. So that's it for Meliodas. He has a short sword that, of course, like any other Sacred Treasure, pulls out all his strength, all his magical ability, has the magical ability to clone, and of course, it is just a very strong short sword that is very durable. Let's move on to, well, you know what, we were just talking about Merlin, so let's jump right into Merlin. Merlin's, it's probably my least favorite, just because it's not an actual weapon, but it makes sense. She's a mage. Why would she have, a weapon when her whole deal is with magic? So I get why her sacred weapon is what it is, but it still is just boring to me. And of course, since Merlin is like a mage, her sacred treasure would be a spear, like in all the movies, the fortune tellers go like, yes, I see your future is doing YouTube videos and dying a lonely life, like those things, And it's called Morningstar Alden. I probably pronounced Alden wrong, but whatever. And it takes the literal shape of a little turquoise blue, dark blue sphere thing, and it follows Merlin around. Granted, I would say out of all of the sins, besides Escanor, we know the least about her sacred treasure. Because there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. Since she has the highest magical ability, I'm sure she can do some pretty wicked things with that orb. But all we know so far is it floats on its own, it follows Merlin around, Merlin can see anywhere in the world I think she wants on the globe. So if they're in Leonis, she can look in and be like, show me the kingdom of the giants. Maybe she has to have been there before or whatever. Maybe she can truly be like, show me anywhere. We've seen her do that. And then we've seen her cast her spell when her body is in a coma and she wants to like cast a physical looking shape of herself, she uses her sacred treasure to cast that. I basically thought of like a movie projector. A movie projector is like casting a 3D dimensional form of Merlin. And then the last thing it does, and which is by far the most interesting, is she literally can store her soul in the orb. So after her fight, when she gets all messed up, she stores her soul in the orb so she wouldn't die. But I'm assuming then if the orb gets destroyed, she would die. But also it's a sacred treasure, so I'm assuming it's very hard to destroy it. So that's all we know about Merlin's weapon. I'm assuming it will like allow her to use all her magical strength. But also when Hawk was looking at everyone with the earring, she also had, not only was her magical ability one of the highest, just her like physical strength was also one of the highest. So I'm very excited to see her fight in battle against the Commandments, and I really hope that her orb will take on the form of an actual weapon and she can use it. And she's not just walking around like, shoot laser at them, you special orb. Let's jump right into the second to last one, to Gowther and his sacred treasure. This one is probably the most confusing for me and just the hardest to explain. Let's just start with the name. His sacred treasure's name is Twin Bow Herret. I think I'm pronouncing Herret wrong, right? I'm so used to pronouncing things wrong. But basically, the aesthetic of it is two light energy bows. They're not physical bows. They're not like a wooden and string and pull it back. It literally looks like just like a vertical stick of lightning, and he doesn't even have to do the form of like, I'm going to pretend to pull back. No, he just like sticks his hands in these vertical lines of lightning and like shoots off pretty much laser beams, even though it's a bow and arrow. He's shooting off lasers with it. And this one, again, has some cool different techniques, a few techniques that were named and were used. They're just a little confusing. And this one also does a really good job of showing how Sacred Treasures takes a normal skill and just amplifies it. Because the only other person I've seen this happen with is Diane's Warhammer, Gideon, when she can control a decent amount of Earth, but with the hammer she can control a lot of Earth. And what I mean is when Gowther uses his invasion technique, he can like invade in someone's mind and play with it, with their memories, erase their memories, do whatever he wants. But when he's just using this with his own like physical and magical ability without his sacred treasure, I think he can only do it with like one or two people. However, in like the second or first episode of season 2, when Gowther is fighting Diane, he takes out his sacred treasure, he uses invasion, and it's a giant radius. It's like half the kingdom. He knocks out anyone that doesn't have like a magical ability over 4,000 or 400. And using his sacred treasure, the range of his power is immensely increased, which is really cool. So that's one of the biggest things we've used him see it as. But also, at the end of season 1, when they were all fighting Hendrik, Meliodas wanted to tell all the knights like his plan, and Gowther does this thing where I think he touches his head and then touches Meliodas' head, and like these little, the same color of the lightning's like a pinkish purple, but two little spikes come out of Gowther's head like lightning, and they're pink and purple, so I can only assume he's using Sacred Treasure, but then he's able to communicate to everyone. So his Sacred Treasure doesn't do like a bow and arrow, you shoot, it stabs someone physically. His has to do with the mental and psyche level of hurting humans. And that's why this is the best Sacred Treasure for Gowther, because he is someone without emotions, and he's trying to understand them. That's his thing. He wants to understand humans and their emotions. So now his Sacred Treasure is one that deals with emotions and cold-heartedness, so he can just erase someone's memories, because he doesn't find any, he doesn't care about their memories. If Diane had a sacred weapon, she is too kind-hearted to literally rip someone's memories out, besides maybe Hendrix. But besides that, she would not be willing to use half of the techniques that his sacred weapon can provide. So I think, honestly, he definitely has the best sacred weapon for himself. So again, sum it up, the name of his sacred weapon is Twin Bow Herret. It takes the form of energy beams that he can just shoot out lasers. His most known attack is Invasion, and in Invasion he can either like knock people out, he can play with their memories, he can erase their memories, switch up their memories, and it's best suited for him because he's a cold-hearted person without emotions and is trying to understand them, and this Sacred Treasure deals a lot with emotions and memories and things like that. Okay guys, we finally made it, and that is Escanar's Sacred Treasure, Divine Axe Rieta. Rieta? Rieta. Okay, we'll go with that. And we don't really know much about Escanar's Sacred Treasure because we haven't seen it yet, besides in glimpse like 12 4-second images of it hanging up on a wall and him holding it in the intro. However, freaking in like 7 hours, we're going to get the next episode 14 of Seven Deadly Sins. And guess who's going to be in it? Escanor. Sorry, I'm fanboying. But let's just go over what we do know. We know what it looks like and we know the name. I already said the name, it's the Divine Axe of Rieta. As far as the look, it's all gold and it's just this giant axe. Granted, it's not like a giant warhammer, but it's a big axe. It's not like little handle axe. It's like the handle of a sphere and then an axe on the end. So it's a freaking big wielding thing. It's probably the same length as King's Chastifal. It's also all gold, and at the end of this sphere thing has a huge blade, just a giant blade. Okay, and since I don't read the manga, I don't know his abilities, but I'm going to assume 2 things. It has a lot to do with physical prowess because we see in the intro that he is just a jacked man. Granted, he's not the biggest of the Sins, but he's the beefiest by far. You know, when we're introduced to Gowther in the intro, we see Gowther as like a... We think Gowther is in the suit and he's a giant, just hulking beast man, and he turns out to be a scrawny woman, female, little boy thing. And then Bon is very ripped, but he's very slender. Meliodas is a child. Merlin's a sexy female. Diane is the only one that has the features of looking physically strong, but she's a giant, so of course she does. But friggin' Escanor is like a normal human, but he's ripped to the bone and is massy and meaty. And his sacred treasure is a giant axe. So, you know, I'm really thinking he is going to be the physically strongest by far, even stronger than Diane. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, you know how each sacred treasure has its own little unique thing? I think his axe is going to have something to do with fire. The only reason I say this is because in the intro, the very last second, you can see Escanor just like wailing down, doing a somersault, just slams the ground with his axe, and it breaks, the ground breaks, and like lava shoots up. I would say maybe it's another earthbending type like Diane, but she has that. That's her thing. She's a giant, she gets the earth. But why else would they have lava just spew up? That kind of seems odd. So I'm going to say his have to do with lava, heat, and fire. Just anything like that can maybe shoot out fire. I don't know. Anyways, I would go and like look more into this, but I want to leave some speculation for you guys. I don't want to just do spoilers. If you guys truly are just watching the anime like me, you probably don't want to know everything about a sacred treasure that we haven't seen yet. So I'm going to leave it at that. It looks like a giant freaking golden axe. Sick. I think it's going to deal with fire and having strength techniques. And the name is Divine Axe Rieta. So that's all 7 of the sacred treasures. We talked about where they came from, how they work, and how everyone's compatible with them. If you guys have any questions, comment down, like below. I'm really sorry. You know what? I am truly a loser because I'm not going to be able to review 7 Deadly Sins until Monday. And that means unless I wake up really early and watch the episode, which I'm going to try and do, it's not going to be out until Monday night or Tuesday. And that blows. And the reason is, you know, I'm not just a lazy piece of crap. As soon as I'm done with this video, I have to do some chores. I have to clean my car. I have prom tonight. Prom lasts until like 4 a.m. And then I have church at like 8. And then I have work at like 3. And that goes till 10 o'clock. So I don't have like any time to record. Hopefully I'm able to watch the episode. So then right like as I wake up Monday morning, I'm like, okay, let's get this done. Edit up. Anyways, that's all for this video. Love you all. Like and subscribe. Wish me best luck at prom, if you know what I mean. Anyways, you guys have a great weekend.